Welcome to the Huddle Up Podcast, your go-to show for all things Broncos.
Once again, Broncos country, it is time to huddle up. I am Carl Dumler, and with me as always we have Nick Kendell. This show's focus is all things pertain to your Denver Broncos, with an extra focus on the NFL Draft. Nick and I will continue to talk general Broncos news, but always have a focus towards team building. We still stand by our statement, though, that building teams in the offseason and playing armchair GM is just as fun as the actual games on Sunday. Follow myself on Twitter, at Carl Dumler MHH, as well as follow Nick, at Nick Kendell MHH. And of course, tweet us as much as you like, as we love to talk football with anybody and everybody. Of course, then follow the podcast account at HuddleUpPod. You can also find ours and our co-writers' content at milehighhuddle.com, a part of Scout.com and an affiliate of Scout Media and the CBS Sports Digital Network. We know you listeners are as football and Bronco crazy as we are, so please give us a click and subscribe to us on iTunes. And make sure to rate us and, of course, leave comments, good and bad. We'd love to know anything that we can work on. And, of course, we appreciate the kind comments that we continue to read. Mac Pock, we appreciate your comment recently that this podcast is great. I'm a huge Broncos fan, and it's so hard to find good listenable content during the offseason. I feel so much more informed after listening to this show. Their coverage of the draft and free agency is top-notch. I highly recommend. We appreciate it, and we hope to continue just to put out great content for you, especially during this NFL downtime. You can also find us on iHeart, Stitcher, SoundCloud, CastBox, and Spreaker. Don't forget to share us on Facebook and Twitter. We wouldn't be here today without you listeners, so please take the time to rate and subscribe to let your voices be heard on how you enjoy the show. Well, as we continue this deep dive into the roster, we have come to the players who maybe get the least recognition of the entire offense, maybe of the entire team minus special teams. But yet they play a pivotal role in this season, and that's the inside offensive line players. To me, if you want to look at why this position is so important, maybe you just need to look at two of the top offensive lines in football this past year, the Cowboys and Raiders. Both had great run games. Both had quarterbacks hardly get touched, as they always had a clean pocket to step into. And nothing disrupts a quarterback more than inside pressure. You know, this is we had maybe a disagreement on this show a while back of who is the best defensive player. And, of course, you know, Nick loves his Von Miller, and I'm not saying I don't love my Von Miller, but I said Aaron Donald, and it's a big reason is because of inside pressure. You know, if you can get that, it's amazing. And it shuts down guys even like Tom Brady. And, you know, there's no quarterback that is clean from or is immune to inside pressure. So that's why I love my inside guys on defense, and that's why we should love our inside guys on offense. So maybe we're going to take a look here and see, is there maybe some hope? Because last year, again, we talked about this with the offensive tackles. It wasn't always pretty. And last year with the offensive guards, it wasn't always pretty. The only thing that was pretty last year was Paradis, Matt Paradis, you know, PFF's top offensive center in football. And we'll talk about him here in just a little bit. But before we get to all of this, let me tell you about Audible. Today's podcast is brought to you by Audible. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at www.audibletrial.com/huddleup. Over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. Again, that's www.audibletrial.com/huddleup. Now, for me, I recently found out for work I have 3 books I'm supposed to read, and for over the next 6 months. And thankfully, I was able to find all 3 of them on Audible. And so that'll make my days go a little bit quicker. And it's nice that I can multitask, listen to the book, maybe go for a run at the same time, and get into shape, get my head in shape. Works out great. Gotta love Audible. So make sure to give it a listen. Now let's jump in here with maybe the biggest addition of the entire offseason for the Broncos, the big splash play that Elway made, and that is Ronald Leary. Now, Nick, What can you tell us about this guy? Because he's coming over from the Cowboys, one of maybe the best offensive line in football last year, and like I said, we spent big money to get this guy. So what are we getting?
Well, we are getting some stability in the interior of the offensive line, which we've lacked since Luis Vasquez left. So that's going to be big for us. 6'3", 320 pounds from Memphis University. So he's a Tiger just like Paxton Lynch, and 28 years old. So he is just in his prime right now. He is entering his 6th year in the league, and he's went undrafted back in 2012 and signed with the Cowboys. Talent wasn't ever the issue, though. Many people thought he was a top 60 day 2 talent at worst, but he had a degenerative left knee condition that was found out in the pre-draft process, and it scared teams away. They weren't sure how long he was going to play, if it was going to hold up, if it was going to affect his play right away. And so far it hasn't, knock on wood, but it was enough to keep him undrafted. Luckily for the Broncos, we have great conditioning staff, and we have Greek, who I'm sure worked that knee out. So hopefully nothing to fear there. But again, another offensive lineman with some injury questions. Seems to be a theme with our free agents offensive line signings. But what can you do? He ran a 5.36 40 with 30 bench reps, a 29-inch vertical, 104-inch broad jump, and a 7.873 cone. So not the most athletic guy. He's not going to Ali Marpet people for the draft people out there. He's not that kind of athlete. But he is athletic enough to play in the phone booth, like they like to say for the guards and the centers, and definitely strong enough. He really controls people at the point of attack, and that might have a lot to do with his extremely long arms for his size. He's only 6'3", but he has almost 35-inch arms, so very strong in that regard, and can keep tackles and edge rushers alike from getting into his chest and can control them at the point of attack. So good guard, and hopefully is going to solidify the Broncos offensive line at the left guard or right guard position, and definitely have him penciled in as a starter in one of those positions. Which one, I'm not sure yet. I'm honestly hoping he'll be at left guard just as a stabilizing force for Garrett Bowles, but I see the merits of right guard as well, because that's not where Garcia played last year. Maybe he's more comfortable at left guard, and he looks like a pretty solid run blocker, so it might make a world of difference on the Broncos being able to run to the right side this upcoming season. Oh, and obviously we got to get into the contract. He was our biggest signing this year, like you talked about. We didn't have as much cap room to deal with, so we didn't have the monster, splashes in free agency like we had in the Talib, Ward, DeMarcus Ware days, or even the Peyton Manning signing days. But still a pretty good contract for a guard, 4-year, $35 million with $20 million guaranteed. So Broncos thought a lot about this guy. I talked with several Bronco reporters and beat writers at the Combine, and everybody was saying that the Broncos' number one target in the offseason, outside of potentially Tony Romo, was Ronald Leary, and they signed him right away, the first signing. So good player, and hopefully he'll be a calming factor for the interior offensive line like Luis Vasquez was when he came over from San Diego.
Now, the big question that I have with Ronald Leary, and I think a lot of people out there have kind of had with him, is what do you see about him that makes you think he's not just a product of being surrounded by 2 all-pro players?
Well, when you watch him on tape, he still is executing and doing his part. Honestly, playing between guys like Smith and Frederick, if he's not doing his job, it's going to be that much more obvious because those guys aren't messing up that often. So if Leary is effing up, that's going to really be obvious on tape. I mean, when you saw our offensive line and Sembrelo was struggling, or Stevenson, it's obvious that guy is not getting it done. And you didn't see that with Leary. A lot of times, even though he's playing between Smith and Frederick, if they are doing a zone stretch or a drive block, and Leary's clearing that guy out, him and Martin. Obviously, Zach Martin is the better talent. He's probably the best guard in football right now. It's either him or Osemele with the Raiders, in my opinion. But very solid player. Just entering his prime right now, and with the Broncos going to more of a power blocking scheme, he should find a home at left or right guard and make a big difference. And he was talented on his own outside of the scope of Smith and Frederick. Now, granted, does that help him, having those 2 all-pro level players next to him? Absolutely. But he's still executing and making plays on tape when I watched him. So I'm not that worried about it. I'm just more worried about paying big money for a guard. The position is important, but is it super important? I mean, it's more of a complementary piece compared to the tackle. And his health, obviously talked about that degenerative knee issue, and if that's something that could be an issue down the road. And we have him for 4 years, $35 million and $20 million guaranteed. So hopefully we don't have to worry about that.
I think the thing that excites me most about him probably actually boils down to more the leadership that he brings. I've been hearing a lot of great stories of things that he's already done, of just kind of being that voice in the locker room, being that guy that really, lets guys know, like, this is what we're going to be. Like, we're not going to be anything less than this. And so when I hear things like that, of him just kind of being not only the voice, but then also showing it on the field, of just that aggressive attitude, I'm excited to kind of see what that brings to the team. And other guys feed off that. You see one guy go pancake a guy, you want to be the next guy to do that. So I think that's great. I think it's also great for Max Garcia. We saw, and we're going to talk about him here in just a minute, but his rookie year, I thought he actually showed a ton of promise. He kept coming in both left guard, right guard, depending if who was hurt more, Vasquez or Mathis. And at both spots, he showed pretty well when he was asked to do some spot duty. And we heard that year Vasquez really took him under his wing and said, this is the guy I want to train up. And, I wonder if he missed that leadership, that could actually help him in that. And I wonder if Leary can really kind of step into that and help him get to that next level. So I'm excited to kind of see that and to see what Leary can bring to the team. But right now, I'm just looking at his contract right now. It's mostly actually just a 2-year, about a $19 million deal, $18 million deal. Just what I'm looking at, I guess about $18 million or so. After that, not much of a huge dead money hit after the first 2 years. So if that knee starts showing up, Broncos can get out of the deal. That's kind of how Elway always loves to put these deals, is put a lot of the money in the front 2 years so that he can get out of bad deals. But yeah, I think Leary brings a lot of that leadership and brings a guy that we can depend upon. He's going to do his job. I agree. I don't think he is just a product of being surrounded by 2 all-pro kind of talents. Last year he didn't give up a single sack. So, he's more than just go destroy people. He actually does well keeping his feet below him and not letting anybody get into him. And he was actually a better pass blocker, I think, than run blocker this past year. He's 14th best according to Pro Football Focus run blocker at the guard position. And he actually graded out better than, is it Lyle Collins? Is that how you say his name? Lyle
Collins, yeah.
Lyle Collins. He played those first couple games. Leary was kind of on the bench for those. And Leary actually graded out better as the season went on. So it was kind of almost a upgrade at the position because of injury, which is kind of weird to say. I don't know what Collins would have done for the entire season. But yeah, Leary, I think he showed well. I think he's going to be a great player for this team. And again, we talked last episode about the jump from Stevenson or Sambrilo to Watson. Even if he just plays average, that's a huge jump. And Leary at the right guard or even left guard position, whichever one he is, that's a huge jump for the position. Those are the 2 positions that you can sit here and say Broncos upgraded on the offensive line. Might have downgraded at the left tackle position. We'll just have to wait and see. And Paradis going to have to see how he does coming back from injury. But and Garcia, of course, third year in the league. Can he improve? Can he actually learn from his mistakes last year? But right now, Leary, huge upgrade over Schofield from last season, in my opinion.
And just from hearing you talk about that, I think we're both on the same page that Schofield is probably the one that's going to be kicked out of that starting spot, and Garcia will maintain that starting spot opposite Leary.
Yeah. No, I agree. I was going to ask you this question later, and we haven't quite got into Garcia yet, but I would say maybe the guy that could challenge Garcia for that starting position is McGovern.
Agreed.
More than
maybe
Schofield.
Turner.
Yeah, we'll have to see.
I think McGovern's probably the one that'll challenge him as well.
Yeah. The one thing I will say about our guard position, I actually like the depth this year.
There is
Max
depth.
Garcia, there is actual depth. If Garcia or Schofield went down last year, oh man, it was not good behind them. I guess we had McGovern, but he wasn't ready. The team showed that by not letting him play in a meaningless game in week 17. But we could get into. That's probably the most angry I've ever been with Kubiak. I love Kubiak. I love what he brought to the Broncos, but his work in week 17 last year was deplorable. That was terrible. They won, but I know I'm saying this about a win, but you had a guy with a grade 5 strained shoulder starting.
Yeah.
Your potential future quarterback just sitting on the bench doing nothing. Then you have guys like McGovern, who could be a future at the position, sitting on the bench. I don't think he even suited up, if I remember right.
I think he was inactive all season.
Yeah. So things like that, just stupid. I know he knew it was his last game, but oh boy, that's for another day. Anyway, we're talking about left guard and right guard and center here. And Leary, I'm excited to see what he brings and just to see if he could really solidify that inside and get some other guys playing at a top level. Like I said, you lead by example. If he's the guy that's going out there mauling people, others will follow. So I'm excited to see what he could do. And maybe, like you said, on that right side, man, that could be a lot of beef.
Yeah, agreed. But also on the left side, he could help Bowles a lot. A raw player who's probably still getting some of those blitz checks and going to have some struggles probably with stunts early. I mean, he did do pretty well with stunts on tape, but it's a different beast in the NFL. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure if he'll be left guard or right guard.
Yeah.
It's going to depend on what's the best combo.
Yep. And a lot of that will depend on Garcia because he wanted to move over to left guard because he said he felt more comfortable there is the way I understand it. And that's the guy we're going to talk about here. A 6'4", 309-pound, 25-year-old he went to the University of Florida. And he's one of those guys, he actually has some versatility because he played left tackle, left guard, and center in college. And Broncos took him in the 4th round of the 2015 draft, and I actually thought he was going to start at center for us. And then, of course, Paradis stepped in and showed well. And so can't fault that. But I've loved his potential. He's a guy with some leadership qualities and a nice guy to cheer for. He's a really nice guy. I've heard him talk quite a few times, and he just seems like a nice guy off the field, but a guy that wants to destroy people on it. So, but like I said, this last year, I felt like he kind of went downhill a little bit compared to his rookie year, where he showed a lot more promise. And what else can you tell us about this guy?
Well, Max Garcia is 25 years old, 6'4", about 310 pounds, and selected in the 4th round by the Broncos in 2015, the same draft as they took Tyson Brilo. He had a solid pro day, 8.183 cone, 8 foot 7 inch broad jump, 28 inch vertical, and measured in with 33 1/8 arm length. So decent arm length for a guard for sure. And was a team captain at Florida. So like you mentioned, everybody raves about the guy's character and work ethic and just a good guy, a guy you'd like to have a beer with and would like on your side in an alley fight probably as well, because he is mean when he needs to be. Really just a strong, stout player. He has the core strength to move people off the point of attack and has a strong hands as well. Gets a real good jolt when he first gets them. Overall has pretty good body control, but not always the most fluid guy in space. There's a couple zone stretches last year where I watched Okung and Garcia peel off some blockers to the second level, and Garcia just didn't have the foot speed to get to the second level, to get to the spot in time. And that's probably has a lot to do with just NFL defenses these days are more and more and more athletic than they've ever been compared to the offensive line. So what can you do in that regard? But moving to a more power-based scheme, more helmet-on-helmet blocking, I think Garcia probably will do better there. That's really what his strengths are. We talked about it on the last episode. He does struggle with stunts. He's not always the quickest with his change of direction ability and he needs to show better processing speed to overcome those limitations. And he just looked pretty poor against stunts, specifically early in the season, working in tandem with Okung. So I'm excited for him. He needs to be healthy, obviously, and he needs to take that step this year because he looks to be the least secure guy on our offensive line. And if the offensive line struggles again this year, Garcia is probably the guy whose head is on the chopping block.
Agreed. Now, what I do love and why I have a little bit of hope for promise this year is how he closed out the season. I talked earlier about that last Raiders game and how much I didn't like some of the moves that were made. But Garcia, he showed well. He had about an 80 grade according to Pro Football Focus and only gave up 1 pressure in that game on passing downs. And of course, he did well in the run game. That's never really been a big question with him is his run blocking. He's done well with that. But the week before that, he had the highest grade on the offense against the Chiefs. It was a terrible game, downright terrible game, but he actually played well. One of the few players that did in both pass and run game. And so closing out that way just gives me that little bit of hope that maybe something clicked. We keep hearing about with Paxton Lynch that those last 2 weeks of practice, something just clicked all of a sudden. Well, maybe that's the same way with Garcia those last 2 weeks of the actual season. And maybe, again, just having that veteran player on the other side that can kind of help him through some things and just to understand what teams are trying to throw at him. Maybe we see a different Garcia this year, and we need him to be a different Garcia this year. That's the big thing. All these guys, we need them to step up. We need the offensive line to be better than what it was last year. If the offensive line is the same or worse, we're not making the playoffs. It's as simple as that.
Well, I mean, maybe. If the run defense steps up and the quarterback play takes another level, I could see the offensive line potentially being as poor this year, but the team's still making the playoffs. Granted, it's not likely to see the quarterback play improve that much without the offensive line doing better and without the run game improving via better run blocking. But agreed almost to a T. Garcia is probably, like I talked about, the guy whose head would be on the chopping block if the unit failed. It'd probably be him or Watson would be my assumption based on, if you have a Bowles, Leary, Paradis, Garcia, Watson starting offensive line. So, yeah, it's his third year, second year starting, and kind of understands what it takes. And like you mentioned, he showed improvement as the year went on. I feel like I've argued with some people online that Garcia is the better option run blocking and just blocking in general compared to Schofield. And I saw that last year. Schofield started off pretty solid. I was impressed with him at guard, especially as a pass blocker. But when it came to run blocking, moving people, and handling bull rushes, he just too many times and could not get enough push. And you didn't see that with Garcia. Garcia was more mental processing and just consistency from a snap-to-snap basis, which I have hope will improve compared to Schofield's lack of core strength. He's almost a little bit too much of a tweener. We'll talk some more about him in a bit. But with us switching to more power scheme, I think Garcia will probably do pretty well this year. And whether it be left guard or right guard again, hopefully the interior offensive line as a whole will be improved and the Broncos can protect the interior of the offensive line in the pass rushing and get a push in the ground game.
All right, well, let's talk about the one guy that is for sure returning, at least I think is for sure returning, unless his injury is more than people think. But we've heard good things about it. Matt Paradis, the one bright light last year, I guess you could say, on the offense beyond our wide receivers. And, I was very impressed with this guy, for the pain that he went through and just just being surrounded by terrible talent. This guy shined through, and he's 6'3", 300 pounds, played at Boise State. If Bronco fans remember, the other Bronco, the blue field. And I love reading on this guy because he's like that, the little man making the big leap, the unheralded star that nobody thought could make it. Played 8-man football in high school. And have you ever watched 8-man football before?
I feel like I've seen 8-man football like in Madden franchise mode.
Okay.
Where they don't have the offensive line going, you're just going through training camp and stuff. But other than that, not so much.
Okay. Well, see, this is how small my town is. We play 8-man football. And for a while, they were kind of thinking about going down to 6-man football. But, yeah, 8-man football. I grew up playing 11-man football. And so all of a sudden have to watch 8-man. It is crazy to watch. I mean, it's like that 7-on-7 flag football game where you're just going deep or running back, just running around the edge. Just, if you have speed, you win. That's the rule of the game. And it's crazy to watch. I don't call it football. I don't know. It's weird. I'm an 11-man guy. So, but yeah, 8-man football. I've been watching a lot for the last couple of years, trying to figure out how the actual rules work. It's very unique, and that's what he grew up with playing, and somehow made it to not big university, but decent size. I mean, Boise State's really well known. They're known for their Statue of Liberty play.
Yeah, that one where they had Ian Johnson. I think it was against Oklahoma. Score.
Yeah, that was a crazy game. And but anyway, he was drafted by the Broncos, 6th round, 2014, and spent his first year on the practice squad. Again, just a guy that's always had to kind of play beyond, to really get people's attention. And he was our starting center for the Super Bowl team in 2015, and just been a star ever since. And this offseason, he had double hip surgery. That's crazy. And
yeah, too young for that.
I know. Oh, my goodness. But he recently, I think it was last week, got cleared for football activity, which is very exciting. They say he's well ahead of schedule for where they thought he would be at this time of year. But this is what he had to say about it. He said, "I guess I never realized how much pain I was in previously. And now it's like, you mean I'm not supposed to be in pain all day, every day?" So just Bronco fans, we don't always know what these players are going through. Demaryius Thomas last year, he had a pretty serious injury. I think was it to his hip as well?
Yes, it was.
Yeah, and it made it difficult for him to cut. Every time he took a step on that hip, there was pain. And it was the same for Paradis, where he couldn't even practice during the week. They saved everything up for the game, and then he'd go right back on the bench. And so, again, just appreciate the toughness that he showed last year to go out there and continue to play tough and actually play well, even with double hips that were hurting pretty bad. And so I'm excited to see what he can do when he's actually healthy. My big question with that, and this is going to be my big question even if he didn't have to have hip surgery, how is he going to be strength-wise? Because he has not been able to hardly work out this offseason other than just to rehab the hips. And he was already struggling a little bit just to show strength. Like he's a perfect zone blocking scheme center. He's got decent speed. He's got good foot quickness. He's got ability to say that his hips were hurting that bad, but to watch him actually flip those hips to get in front of a guy, I was very impressed by that. That's the one thing I always saw on film was that he could get locked up with the guy and then beat him to the spot to get him to close him off. But again, we're switching to a power blocking scheme. He's a little bit of kind of undersized at 300 pounds for the interior and not really known for being that power blocking guy, not known for his ability to pancake a guy. And yeah, here he is getting ready to make the switch. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I am a little bit concerned about him switching to the power scheme. His best work when I tracked his film was doing combo blocks or working horizontally or to the second level, and that's prototype zone blocking scheme, or what a zone blocking scheme would ask the center to do. So he's going to have much more helmet on helmet blocking. He still will have to do some combos because he's going to be with the guards, and that is required sometimes with the power scheme as well. But I am concerned with him. He's just not a overwhelming blocker. He just doesn't show overwhelming power at the point of attack. He wins with technique, savviness, and leverage. I mean, don't get me wrong. He definitely beat me in an arm wrestling competition. He'd throw me through the window. But he's not just an absolute mauler in the run game. So that paired with his hip injuries does have me concerned about what he's going to be. Now, that said, when I say concerned, I mean, is he going to be the number one rated center in the league by Pro Football Focus next year? Probably not, but he's still, one of the better centers in the league, and barring health of his hips, he should be out there performing and doing well, especially having Leary next to him and hopefully Garcia. So better in the run block in that regard, more strength, and hopefully not in pain constantly. So he didn't have the best combine. He's not, like we talked about, he's not an incredible athlete. He ran a 5.3 440, 4.46 20-yard shuttle, which is really solid, in a 7.63 cone. So he does have agility, just not overly long speed or strong, and a smart player. So I'm excited to get him back on the field. Hopefully, reports are that he'll be out there pretty soon. So getting the chemistry with the guys around him is huge, and I wasn't expecting him to be back this early, so that's great news. And just a prototype, I say prototype a lot, but you have those types that are the hard hat and lunch pail guys that go to work and do the hard work and nitty gritty trench work, and then go home. And that's Paradis, man. If it wasn't for Pro Football Focus and you weren't like a hardcore Bronco fan, some of those people, Bronco fans included, might not even know who Paradis is. Those trench guys don't get the love that the quarterback or the fantasy football positions get. But great player, and for as much flack as always gets for not hitting offensive line picks, this was a home run. 6th-round pick, and then had it even stuffed him on the practice squad for a year, and now one of the better centers in the league. And that's as good as it gets. So hopefully he'll be healthy, and I'm excited to get him on the field.
Yeah. Now that's what I loved is, like I said, he's worked hard. He's always been a hard worker, keep his nose to the grindstone. He's not a complainer. Last year being in all that pain, I don't think I ever heard him complain about all the pain he was in or that they were still having him go out there or anything like that. I mean, he still played week 17. Again, another guy that I'm like, why is he out there? But he toughed it out and just showed what he does for the team. And, just to kind of prove how great this guy's been for us. I mean, he has been not only the top bonus earner for performance beyond contract, but he's been doing it for the last 2 years in the NFL. And, he's earning almost more in bonus money because this is what the league does is at the end of the year, they hand out extra money to players who played beyond their contract. And, Paradis, he's been the top guy for the Broncos the last 2 years, and he's deserved it. He's improved, and he's worked hard, just to show some of his improvement from 2015 to 2016. 2015, this is how he's improved in the pass blocking. He gave up 29 pressures in 2015. Not terrible, not worse than the league, but not great either. This last year only gave up 17. That was good for 13th among all centers. And so, again, just showing that improvement that he brings to the roster. And hopefully this year we can see that number drop even more. So he is top 5 center in the league. I don't quite agree with PFF about him being the top center. I'm glad that he got that recognition. He deserves all the recognition in the world. But, he's still got a ways to go, and I think he can get there. He is that hard worker that he sees, they need him to become a power blocker. Maybe he does work to get a little bit more strength. And so Broncos would do well to try to maybe lock him up long term, or maybe try to find him a trade partner to his own blocking scheme after this season. I hate to say that. I that's way in the future, but he's a guy that has some value around the league. Teams recognize what he can bring to a team.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's just us being practical. You can't re-sign everybody, and you can't go over the salary cap. So Broncos, they're not in cap hell, but next year projects to be close to the top of the cap. So we don't have a lot of money to play with, and Paradis potentially is going to see a pretty big payday for how he's played. So maybe it wouldn't be the worst idea to look to ship him and get some value for him while we can, especially if some of the guys behind him step up and show that they can potentially take a larger role heading into this season and seasons going forward.
And one of those guys is Connor McGovern. He's been the guy that's been stepping in during OTAs and mini camp, and he's been playing there at center there for the Broncos and has shown some promise. I've heard some really good things about how he's looking this year compared to last. But Broncos were able to get him. It was in the 5th round, I think, of the 2016 draft from the University of Missouri, where he played left tackle, right tackle, and right guard for them in college. Yeah, he was – I remember when we drafted him, there was a lot of analysts that said, good pick because a lot of people had 3rd-round value on him, but they didn't understand how he'd fit in the scheme because he's more of a power blocking scheme kind of guy. That's what they ran at Missouri. And he's known for just being a huge weight room guy. And I'll get into that here in just a second. But, yeah, he's really known to fit better in the power blocking scheme. And he's one of those guys that I think could have a huge change because of this scheme change. Like I said, he could be a better fit with what we have now. Before we get into that, kind of an interesting fact, I found this out today when doing all these notes. In high school, he was named North Dakota's Gatorade Player of the Year back in 2010 as an offensive line player. I know it's North Dakota, but yeah. That's still crazy for an offensive line player to win that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. He's been a solid player wherever he's gone. And, you say that he's not the best fit in his own scheme, but at the Combine, he showed that he has the athleticism to potentially play in either scheme. I mean, he didn't run a sub 540, ran a 5.11, but he destroyed the bench reps with 33 and was great in the jumps and the agility drills. He had a 109-inch broad jump, which was one of the better ones, a 7.53 cone, and a 4.65 20-yard shuttle. So his spider graph, if you go over to Mock Draftable, it's besides his height, weight, speed, or not besides the speed, his height, weight, and arm length, everything else is, great. So he's a good athlete and strong. And spending a year, inactive and getting the technique down, I think that he's somebody that I'm going to be watching particularly in preseason and camp, because he needs to take the next step and offer adequate cheap depth for the team. And I think that he could do that. He could challenge for a starting guard spot. And if worse comes to worse, he could be a starting center. The athleticism and the gym workout mentality transfers to the field, because he has the athleticism and the tools to be a starting interior offensive lineman in the NFL, I believe.
I agree. And that's why I said earlier in the episode, if there is a guy that I think could really challenge Garcia even early on, everybody thinks Garcia is just kind of plugged in there to the starting lineup. I really think McGovern could challenge him. He showed a little bit of promise last year in preseason. He graded out as the best offensive player, the best offensive line player in the 49ers game last year. And in 68 snaps, only gave up one pressure. And, I think that was the game that the team averaged 5 yards per carry. So showed up well when he was actually asked to make a lot of snaps. And I remember there's a couple times that in other games he got blown back a little bit because he didn't have his feet below him. But yeah, I think he's a guy that could really surprise some people, that maybe he could crack that starting lineup. And if Paradis isn't ready to go, I don't think that they should hesitate to have McGovern step in there, because I think he could be a great fit there on the interior and really show some strength to move the pocket. And, I love the stories that I read about this guy of just how hard he works. There's the story of when he was in college in the offseason, the team was having, just crazy weight room challenges and everything else. And he tried to bench 515 pounds.
Jesus.
I don't know what you bench, but that's way beyond what I would even think about. But he tore his pectoral muscle trying to bench that. And he didn't miss a single game. He still went out there and toughed it out, even with the torn pectoral muscle. And, he's been shown, I think he has a video out there where he squatted 690 pounds 6 times. That's, yeah.
He's a monster.
Oh, my goodness, yeah. I was a big weight room guy growing up. I like to brag. I don't know if I still have it, but I did set the state record for anybody under 155 pounds for squat. So I like to brag about that. But, yeah, 690 pounds, I'm sitting here going, oh, my goodness, I'm pretty sure that would crush me into the ground. I don't know how the cement below you doesn't break as you're trying to take a step. So
I'm pretty sure anything weighing that much has its own gravitational pull, so I'm not going to mess with it. Like being a scientist, I'm like, that's probably going to mess with my biology or something. That's too much weight.
Yeah, so he's a huge gym rat, and that does translate. I mean, he shows well of just how hard he works on the field. He's not always the most technically sound guy, but he has great short area quickness and does well of trying to keep his feet below him and can move people. That was one thing you saw in college is he definitely moved people as a tackle. And I think he can do the same as an interior guard.
Yeah, I agree. Or center.
Yeah, or center. Yeah, sorry. Interior guy. There we go. But, yeah, he's probably the one guy that I think is such a wild card of what he could bring to this team. I kind of want to see him on the field.
6 offensive lineman sets. Let's get it done.
Hey, the Raiders did it to us that first game. And
I'm all for it.
Us. Yeah, they destroyed it. So I wouldn't mind McGovern getting there on the edge and just saying, bring it. Go against Khalil Mack and say, here we go, boy. I'll show you what real strength is about.
Yeah, have him be that right guard, like pair him next to Garcia and then Watson, and then just go. Just like literally march him forward. So old school football. Yeah, maybe bring back the wing T even.
There you go. Flying V.
Yeah, exactly. So, I'm excited for him. Coming into his second year, I'm expecting him to take a larger role. Preseason, they'll be very indicative because he was up and down last year. And then, a lot of times for those later round picks, and we saw with Paradis even, they like to give him some time before they shove him out there on the field. So I'm expecting a jump this year, and he definitely fits in the long-term plans for the position of the interior offensive lineman.
All right, well, let's jump to our starting right guard last year. And maybe the biggest swing player on the team, and Michael Schofield, a man who went to the University of Michigan and comes in at 6'6", 301 pounds. So a little bit taller than you see a lot of guards out there, but that was kind of where the Broncos had to move him because right tackle wasn't working out great, and we didn't have much at right guard. I kind of felt bad for him last year. I don't know if you remember this, but in training camp, he seemed to be moved everywhere.
Yeah.
Okung was kind of still recovering from some injury issues, so they had him at left tackle. Then all of a sudden they're having him at right tackle. Then they're trying to have him learn guard, and I just felt like he was kind of given a disservice of not really given that chance to just kind of sit at one position and really learn it. So when he came out there at the right guard, and you talked about it a little bit ago, of he actually impressed. Against Carolina, I was blown away by how well he played at the right guard position. And kind of seemed like some teams figured out a little bit of his strengths and weaknesses and learned how to attack him as the season went on. But early on, he was showing a lot of promise for the Broncos. But I kind of worry for this upcoming year of just how much does last year translate to this year because of that whole switch from zone scheme to power scheme. He seemed like a little bit better fit at that zone scheme. And, kind of see that with his, 5.01 40 during the combine, his last year in college. The rest of it, he didn't really test all that well. 24-inch vertical, 93-inch broad jump isn't that great.
Those are horrible.
Yeah, yeah. 4.57 20-yard isn't terrible.
No, that's solid. His three-cone was good as well at 7.62. All
right.
Those were above the 65th percentile. Many of them like the 80th. So solid athlete, not that much lower body explosion though.
Yeah. So that's when I look at this upcoming season, to have him move from starter to now backup. You and I talked about this earlier today when we were kind of getting ready for this episode. I kind of wonder if he's maybe a better fit at tackle than guard.
He can do both, but with the power scheme, especially being 6'6", 301 pounds, he just does not have the sand in his pants or the strength that I see him being a guard in a power scheme. He just doesn't have it. Worst case scenario, I guess he can. If there are injuries and whatnot, he can do it. He showed it last year. But I'm thinking most likely he's probably backup right tackle, the fourth tackle. And his versatility. I mean, you talked about feeling bad for him for being kicked around, but honestly, I think that's probably a good thing for him because seeing his tape, if he's going to make it in the league, he's going to need to make himself versatile. He's going to need to be able to play 4 or 5 different positions on the offensive line because he just doesn't have the tools to be a starting guard or tackle in the league, at least from what he's shown so far. Just not strong enough to be a guard because he got pushed back in the run game a lot and not long or agile enough really to be a starting tackle. So if he's going to make it in the league, he's probably going to need to make himself versatile and available to play multiple positions. That's
his best quality, I think. His ability to just kind of step in and he never really complains about it either. He's one of those guys that kind of just, all right, coach, whatever you need. And, coaches love those kind of guys. And so I'm glad he's on the roster. I know there's a lot of people that wanted Schofield cut after his rookie season, after the Raiders game. And, but yeah, I think it's a good thing to have those kind of players on your team. He's one of those guys that he saves us a roster spot just by him being here.
Exactly.
And that's huge with, there's a lot of questions at some other positions of wide receiver, running back, tight end, even quarterback of how many guys you want to keep. Defensive wise, we have quite a bit of depth on the defensive side. So you'd like to be able to save that one position, and Schofield gives that to us. Like you said, he's played that right tackle. He's played right guard now. He's gotten some experience at left tackle. I wouldn't be surprised if during training camp they even tried him out at center a little bit.
Yeah,
just to give him some work and just in case they need him to come in. But yeah, I like his versatility and I like his work. I mean, he works hard. He fought through some terrible games to come back and actually play decently. Not great, but he's done well of just fighting through some really bad times. So yeah, I appreciate that about him. But he's going to be in a fight also with a guy by the name of Billy Turner, a guy the Broncos signed last year midseason from North Dakota State University, 6'5", 310 pound. Again, another kind of tall, big offensive guard, but a guy that maybe fits a little bit better of the type of scheme that we're trying to run here now. But he spent his first 3 years with Miami. He was a third-round pick for them in 2014. And unfortunately, he was cut mid-season this past year after a disaster at left tackle. I don't know. Did you ever watch that game? Ever see him play that?
I do not spend much of my free time watching Dolphins tape. Their uniforms are gross enough that I just try to avoid them when we're not playing them.
Okay,
I'll cheer for them when they're playing the Patriots, though.
There you go. No, I watched this, right after the Broncos signed him because I wanted to see what we were getting. And unfortunately, I started with his worst game ever. He was graded as the worst left tackle that week. I can't quite remember who they were playing, but he gave up 3 sacks, 2 quarterback hits, and 3 hurries in one game. Not good. But that was at left tackle. They kind of put him out there because there were some injuries that came to the team, and he just was put out there by necessity. And that did not go well, obviously. So he was cut after that one and went to Baltimore after that for a week. And then they cut him they needed another roster spot. And, of course, then the Broncos picked him up and gave him some time to get on the field, actually. They talked about that he'd earned some time on the field with his play in the practice. I can't remember him playing a whole lot, though. I don't remember what he looked like. Do you remember?
It was not inspiring, but it was better run blocking than what Schofield showed at guard. So I guess it was an upgrade in that regard. But he was not anything to write home about, really. Okay.
Well, yeah, he's another guy. He's kind of fighting for that roster spot, that final roster spot possibly on the team, and needs to prove a lot of, maybe he does have some versatility. Maybe he can improve on his left tackle playability and his ability to also start on the guard position as well. But we're going to have to see. There's going to be a lot of camp battles for this offensive tackle. I think we have the first about 6 guys for sure secured. McGovern being that one for sure backup. But beyond them, it's anybody's game for those last maybe 2-3 roster spots. Somebody has to step up and prove themselves.
Yeah, agreed. Right now, if I was a betting man, I would say Bowles obviously makes it. Watson obviously makes it. Leary obviously makes it. Paradis, was that 5?
That's 4.
That's 4.
Yeah, and the other starter you've forgotten is Garcia so far.
Garcia, yep, and Garcia. So those will be the starters. And then probably McGovern and Schofield. That would be my guess. There might be one more on there, but if I had to guess. Oh, and Sambrailo.
Yeah.
So 8 people makes sense. Potentially you could see Turner beaten out. McGovern as a 5th-round pick, or Schofield, or maybe Stevenson kicking Sambrailo out. Now, going back, I've been waiting to get this in, but you talked about when you were the most upset with Kubiak playing Paradis, even though he's injured, and not playing Lynch in that Week 17 win against the Raiders, as the most irritated you were with Kubiak. Most irritated I was with Kubiak is when him and Dennison failed to give Schofield any help at right tackle when Mac was destroying him. Screaming at my computer screen, give him a tight end to chip him, do something different. You have to adjust. Mac is disrupting your entire game plan. Change your game plan. You have to be flexible. You have to react. And Mac went on to, I think, have 3.5 sacks, and Schofield, who I believe had an injury, he was playing with an injury, just could not match up with him. So Schofield, I think he was better at right tackle, honestly, than right guard. And I mean, maybe he's a dark horse to start at right tackle this year. We'll see. I don't think so. It'll probably be Watson. But just a valuable swing player that you need to have.
I kind of forgot about that because they did the same thing then in that Kansas City game with Houston destroying us, where they –
at least they took out Sambrailo. They did it eventually.
Right. But it's still one of those, what are you doing? You realize these guys can't handle this, and yet you just keep sending them out there with nothing. Not even a running back to come over and try to cover that side or anything. And, yeah, I kind of forgot about that. Those are my top 2 for anger with Kubiak. Like I said, I love Kubiak. He was here for all 3 of our Super Bowls, so can't be angry with him too much. But he had his faults for sure as a coach. He was a little bit stubborn on some things that, you're just like, come on, man. You got to realize you're not perfect, and you got to be willing to adjust in this league.
Yeah, I agree completely. Well, moving along, we probably should hit some of the 2018 potential interior guys. I will fully admit I do not watch them as much as I watch the tackles because I prefer the money positions, especially early on, the guys who are more likely to go early in the draft. So most of my time so far has been breaking down edge rushers, tackles, cornerbacks, somewhat 5 techniques, and inside linebackers. Obviously the top safeties like Derwin James and Minkah Fitzpatrick. I will go to later because it seems like the way the NFL is heading for most of these guys, the starting NFL guards didn't play guard in college. They played tackle. So, I mean, you see that with Forrest Lamp. You see that with McGovern, who played tackle. Zach Martin played tackle. Brandon Scherf played tackle. So there's a fair amount of college tackles who get moved inside due to lack of arm length or some sort of athletic measurement. But these are the guards and centers right now that, to me, have stuck out and I think will be probably day 1, day 2, maybe early day 3 picks next year. First off, you got Martez Ivey, who plays tackle for Florida, but I am guessing he will probably end up a guard that just makes better sense for how he plays. He's more of a occupier and a mover rather than a fleet of foot athlete at the edge. I think he'd get exposed at tackle in the NFL, but strong athlete. Not a strong athlete for the guard position, a strong player. My favorite guard next year is Quentin Nelson. I think he would have been a top 20 pick this last year. He is that strong, just dominates at the point of attack, and very fun guard from Notre Dame. Him and McGlinchey, the left tackle for Notre Dame, are going to be a lot of fun this year. And although I do not like the Fighting Irish myself and am not a fan of the coach over at Notre Dame, although apparently a lot of Notre Dame people aren't very happy with their coach either, but I might have to tune into some Fighting Irish games just to watch McGlinchey and Nelson because that's probably the best left tackle, left guard combo in the league next year. The other really solid guard of note is Billy Price from Ohio State. So a lot of fun. Ohio State runs the ball a lot, and they got Weber, who's a fun running back to watch. So Price is one to watch. No way I'm going to say this one right. Wisconsin has a monster guard. I think he's like 6'7", and pretty good mover. You'll see him move around. When I was watching tape of Ramchick last year, the guard was oftentimes the guy that best player in that line, but the guard next to him played pretty well as well, and that was Bo Benzelschwale. Yeah, not the easiest name to say. I could knock down Okorafor, but Benzelschwale will do it to me. Another solid guard is Scott Quessenberry for UCLA. He was been injured, but showed pretty well when he wasn't injured, and I think he's probably a day 2 pick next year. Pretty early on, there's a couple centers who are getting some hype as well. Mason Cole from Michigan's probably the top-rated center right now, center/tackle. Not really so much guard, but he looks like a very solid center to me. Frank Ragnow from Arkansas is a really solid one as well, plays very good. Brian Allen from Michigan State. Tyrone Crowder is a guard for Clemson, who's one of the better players on the offensive line. I think he'll play right guard this year. Strong at the point of attack and can move people. So, solid guard class. It does not look as good at the tackle class, but the tackles are the sexy guys. I mean, let's be real. You had just last year, we're talking about tackles that are maybe playing guard this year. Forrest Lamp played tackle, is going to play guard. I think Deion Dawkins was drafted by Buffalo. I think he's going to probably be playing guard. Taylor Moton, who played right tackle for Western Michigan, is competing for guard in Carolina. So that's just kind of the way it goes. You know, a lot of times the better, bigger, stronger athletes will play tackle, and then like get inside you have to be pretty darn special to be drafted high as a pure guard. And I think Quentin Nelson's potentially one of those guys. And when you saw Travis Frederick go super early in the draft a few years ago, that was super high for a center, and that's just because those guys aren't as valued. So do any of those names pop out to you? I mean, it's not as exciting as the tackles, that's for sure, but pretty good class.
Yeah, I'm kind of with you where I haven't watched these guys a whole lot. Quentin Nelson really –
Nelson, though, right?
Yeah, I've seen Nelson for sure. Yeah, he definitely sticks out. And I'm trying to remember. I think it was Mason Cole was another one that I've watched a little bit and really liked what I saw from him as well. So those are the two names that I've kind of got a little bit more film time on, and some of these other guys definitely have to check them out. And I always appreciate when we're setting up these notes. Nick Kendell is always the one with the draft. He moved on to 2018 a lot faster than I did. So all of you out there, if you really have a lot of 2018 draft questions, Nick is the one to tweet. He's the one to message and get his opinion right now, because he always sends me film. About every day he's like, hey, watch this kid. And so then I watch it. And so that's kind of how I've gotten my 2018 film so far, is from Nick. And I always appreciate when he puts these lists together for us.
Yeah, and I can't have enough. I mean, let's not lie to the listeners. I've already talked some 2019 with you because I'm obsessed with the defensive lineman for 2019.
It's true. He really has. He's obsessed.
But to be fair, 2019's defensive line class deserves hype. Ed Oliver is amazing.
Yeah.
So is Lawrence, and so is Gray. So a lot of exciting names, and I'm just ready for college football to come back. Whatever we're talking about, being 60 days out from the NFL, college season's right around the corner. So the only thing as good as football on Sunday is football on Saturday. So I'm ready for it, and it just needs to get here. I need new tape. Draft Breakdown, if you guys are film breakdown connoisseurs yourself, head on to draftbreakdown.com. They do a great job cutting up film. They just put up a bunch of Ohio State and Michigan players from last year that are going to be draft eligible this year. So I've been breaking down some players. Dorrance Armstrong, a guy that they put more tape on, who's a fun edge rusher, and more tackles and guards. So just check in on them and get your football fix in that way. Be more of a student of the game. Watching the games is fun, but we're here for not just the who, what, when, where, but the why and the how. And that's where we want to get all of the Bronco fans, all the listeners up to, the how and the why, because that's next level stuff, and that's the type of fans that the Broncos deserve. So excited to keep bringing you that content, and we'll keep doing offensive positional breakdowns going forward until training camp, and then hopefully pretty soon we'll have the draft podcast back here before you know it. All right, well, that will wrap up episode 23 of our Huddle Up podcast. Stay tuned for future deep dives into positional groups, as we are just 2 weeks from training camp. Or is it 1 week now?
Well, I guess this will be 1 week for this episode.
1 week now. In case you guys haven't, if there's anything that happened with the interior offensive line this week and we're not talking about it, it's because we recorded these podcasts, the offensive tackle and the interior offensive line ones, back to back, because I am going to be out of the country. But gosh darn it, we are bringing you content every week. We are determined to do it. So here we are doing back-to-back hour-long episodes. We wanted to do 40 minutes, but I like to talk, and so does Carl. So here we are. Bronco fans, make sure to keep checking back on Mile High Huddle for all your updates on training camp battles, preseason games, and all of the Bronco news. You can find Carl on Twitter at Carl Dumler MHH, and myself at Nick Kendell MHH. And find our Denver Bronco articles, as well as our co-authors' articles, on Mile High Huddle, an affiliate of Scout.com and a member of the CBS Digital Sports Media Network. You can follow the Huddle Up podcast by subscribing on iTunes, and for Android users, Stitcher, Spreaker, CastBox, SoundCloud, etc., etc. And please, again, make sure that you are reviewing and rating the show and tweeting at us, because we are here for you guys. We want your feedback and how we can make this a better podcast experience for you listeners, because we are here for you. We love talking football. We're going to be bringing it to you no matter what. But if we aren't giving you guys enjoyable, hard-hitting, analytical pieces, then we just might as well hang up our cleats, so to speak. We're here for you. So leave us a review, rate us, and we'll talk with you, and we'll try to improve. You can follow us on Twitter at Mile High Huddle and at Huddle Up Pod. Again, please be sure to subscribe. For Carl Dumler, I'm Nick Kendell, wrapping up the 23rd episode of the Draft Focus Huddle Up podcast. It's Carl and I's 23rd episode. We'll call it the Draft Huddle Up for now, even though we're not doing that so much. We hope you enjoyed this episode, and we will see you next week for, what do you think, Carl? Tight ends, running backs, or wide receivers?
Let's go tight ends.
Tight ends it is. Jake Butt, we're going to do it. Tight ends. Go Broncos.
Mile High Huddle.